reference to the opening day of football season with like this sort of lackluster response. I, for one, am very excited about football season. My fantasy team is shaped up very nicely and looking for a championship this year. But I'm even more excited to be here today with you, worshiping God. So let's give it up to God this morning. So then we'll be wrapping up this series called Mind of the Sex. In this series, again, we focused on men and women, some of the issues that we deal with, based upon our gender. But today, we're going to be focusing on something as important, if not more important. We're going to talk about molding the mind of the sex for future generations. We're going to be talking about your children, and hopefully you might have put that together when you came in this morning. You've got your Play-Doh, and we're going to have some fun with that hopefully here in just a little bit. But how many of you played with Play-Doh growing up as children? Okay, good. So everybody knows Play-Doh. The thing I love the most about Play-Doh, like I could sit and huff this stuff. Woo! I love the smell of Play-Doh. I mean, it sort of brings me back whenever I was a kid, right? I mean, I used to love playing with Play-Doh. And, we didn't have a lot growing up, and so when I got Play-Doh at home, it was a big deal. And maybe that's why I loved it so much. But when I became a dad and my kids started finding out about Play-Doh, it gave me the opportunity to sort of relive the glory days. It was a lot of fun. I mean, there were moments when, the kids were in bed and Heather and I are sitting here with all the Play-Doh toys on the kitchen table and we're playing with Play-Doh and the kids are asleep, right? It's just a lot of fun. But, Play-Doh is one of those things, it's like one of those timeless playthings. But the awesome part about Play-Doh for children is like it allows them an opportunity to embrace their inner creativity, right? It gives them an opportunity to really expand their mind and just to make all kinds of things. Do you remember any of the things that you used to make when you played with Play-Doh? I mean, we can make anything that your mind could dream up, you could make with Play-Doh. Now, granted, most of it wasn't very good, but to you, it was a masterpiece. Everything that you would make, you would just think it was the greatest thing. And for your parents, it didn't matter what you made, okay? You could come up with your creation and you run up to your mom and you say, Mommy, look. And Mommy's thinking, oh, what a nice horse. And he's like, it's Daddy. But, honestly, for us parents, whenever our children make something, whether it's Play-Doh or it doesn't really matter, there's this sense of pride that we have when our children create something. And it's not really about what they make. It really boils down to the smile on their face. That smile that they have is sort of priceless. But this morning, obviously we're going to be talking a lot about Play-Doh, if you can't tell by the intro. But I want you to take a few minutes and revert back to your childhood. And so everybody open up your Play-Doh. Did you guys get your Play-Doh when you came in? Good, Clan? Good. Open up your Play-Doh. Everybody get your Play-Doh out. Let's just squish it. And let's just mold it. Let's just smell it. I had no problem. Actually, I did mine before y'all came in, so it worked out, right? Can you remember how fun it was to just, it really works well as one of those little stress balls now. Just to set and squeeze. As we think about, we could take this thing and we could ball this one up, and we could take this one and make him into like a little log, and we can stick that head on there, and we can make some little arms and stick it there, and make another little arm, stick it there. Look, you guys didn't realize how creative I was. There's some leg right there. There's a leg right there. And then watch this. This is going to be awesome. Just wait. It's Pastor Chris. His little guitar. My mom would have been proud of that. But as we play with this stuff, and I know some of you may end up playing with this more than you listen to me, but if that's the case, go back and watch the sermon again online this week. Don't eat it, Larry. Oh, doesn't it say on here somewhere about not for human consumption? Yeah, fun to play with, but not to eat. Okay, just keep that in mind. Larry was the kid that ate glue. Oh, man. A lot of things have changed, though, haven't they? From those days when you were growing up, there's a lot of things that have changed. We don't play with Play-Doh every day anymore, but for those of us that are parents, we're still molding and shaping something even more important, something infinitely greater than a yellow can of Play-Doh, because we are molding the minds and lives of our children. Maybe today you're not a parent, but no doubt you have children in your life that you have the opportunity to help mold and shape their mind and their life. See, our kids are a lot like Play-Doh. In the very beginning, they're not much. Okay? When you open up a can of Play-Doh, it's just a round cylinder of mushy stuff. It's colorful, it's pretty, there's really not much to it. Same thing with our children. When they come out, there's not much to them. They don't do a lot of stuff. They just eat, and they sleep, and they excrete bodily fluids from every orifice that they have, right? That's the job of our children. But as time goes on, a lot of things begin to change in their life. Quickly, things change. And we, as parents, we think about our children, we think, man, seems like yesterday. For those of you that may have babies in the house, how quickly do things change? When you come home, yeah, they just sort of lay there and they cry and they, make messes and that sort of thing. But it doesn't take long before you begin noticing their eyes following you around. It doesn't take long for you to begin noticing the noises they begin making. And it's not just about making noise for very long. They start making noise intentionally, trying to communicate to you and trying to tell you things. They begin to smile at you and they begin to laugh at you, don't they? And it doesn't take just a few weeks for these things to begin happening. Where do they learn them from? Now, some of these things are instinctual, okay? There's some things that babies do that they do just out of sheer instinct, but we fail as parents to realize early on that they learn a lot of the things that they do by watching us, by mimicking you, early on. And we fail to realize that even this whole molding process of our children has to begin early on. And again, there's some instinctual things that happen. But babies don't instinctually begin walking. Babies don't instinctually begin talking. They don't instinctually begin yelling and whining and cursing. Ouch. You know what? It's hard to raise kids, isn't it? All of us, I remember one of my big pet peeves, and if your child is this child, I sort of apologize, but I don't. I'm just going to say this. The kid at Walmart, throwing the fit, mama's taking it. And I always told myself, my kid will never. Guess what they have? Only once. But raising kids is tough, isn't it? There's a lot of questions that we have. How in the world do we mold our children? How do we begin to teach them? What do we need to teach them? Where do I need to start? What do I need to start? There's no owner's manual to these things that come out of you. Or is there? You see, I believe that there is an owner's manual for our children. And the majority of you have at least one, if not 3 or 4, laying around your house. Because I believe strongly that the Bible has a lot to say to us about how we raise our children. I believe that the Bible has a lot to say about how to mold our children. Inside of the ancient pages of this great book lie the answers to every single one of your parenting questions. And as we look through the Bible, it does teach us how to mold people, how to mold the mind of children. And so today we're going to look at 4 important factors. Okay, this may be my opinion, but I take them from Scripture. But these are 4 important factors in molding these precious little ones in our life. So where do we begin? More importantly, when do we begin? And I think it's very simple. We have to start molding their minds immediately. As soon as these little creatures come out of the womb, we've got to begin molding their mind through the way that you touch them, the way that you love them, the way that you even speak to them. These little babies, they don't understand what you're doing to them. They don't even get why you're doing what you're doing to them. But their instinct leads them to want to follow you. It leads them to want to watch you. They begin mimicking everything that you say, everything that you do, every single move that you make. And just like fresh Play-Doh, their little minds are soft and pliable and easy to mold and shape. Proverbs chapter 22, verse number 6 says, direct your children onto the right path, and when they are old, they will not leave it. Now, the Bible doesn't say direct your teen down the right place or down the right path, or to direct your adolescent down the right path. Let me let you in on something here in our society. We created the whole teenager-adolescent thing. By the time children in biblical times were teenagers, a lot of them were already working. Some of them were already married. They were already having children of their own. Why? Because there was a transition between childhood and adulthood, nothing in between. And parents raised their children to become adults at a very early age. They started early. They started immediately. And they were very intentional. They began molding and shaping the minds of their children as early as they could. And so the question that I want to challenge you, for those of you that are parents, for those that hope to be parents someday, I want to ask you to ask yourself one very specific question. And that question is this: who do I want my children to become? You say, well, Lance, I would like for my child to be a great business person. I'd like for my child to be an all-star basketball player or a great football player or a great musician. I know a lot of pastors that when their children are growing up, they say, well, I want my kid to follow me in ministry. I didn't ask you what you wanted your children to become. That's an important question, but not right now. The question that you need to be asking early on in their life is, who? See, this whole what thing, a lot of times we focus so much on what for our children, and you know, all of the activities that we get them involved in, all the things that we have them to do. And don't get me wrong, that stuff's important. It's going to be even more important down the road. But sometimes we focus so much on what we want our children to become instead of who we want them to become, and we fall short of our call as parents. What is the wrong question? It's who. I mean, I think about my life. I think about my children. Who do I want my boys to become? I want my boys to be fiercely loyal men. I want my boys to be servant-hearted. I want them to be kind. I want them to be hardworking. I want them to be self-disciplined. I want them to grow up in such a way that when they're at school, they're setting an example for other students and other kids to watch. And above all, and this is something I hammer into my boys all the time, and whenever they need to be disciplined, part of the conversation includes these next two things: honesty and integrity. I want my boys to have all of those things in their life. That's who I want them to become. That's my list. What's yours? Where do you find that list? Where do you find who you want your kid to become? I found it in my owner's manual. These qualities that I want from my boys are qualities that God holds in high esteem. These are things that God wants from me. And I want to take the steps necessary as early as I possibly can to instill these values into my children, to mold them early. And you know what? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to be able to mold your children. Listen, if you're not ready to sign up for the work, don't have babies. A lot of people are out and they're having sex and they're just doing their thing and they're having fun. And if a baby comes along, I'm either going to kill it or I'm just going to let it go or I'm just going to not even raise it right. We've got to take responsibility for those children. And if you're man enough or woman enough to impregnate or be impregnated, you need to be man enough or woman enough to instill these things in your children early on. It's a lot of work. And it's not easy. And you know what? I know we're busy. We got a lot of stuff going on. I got a lot of stuff going on. You got a lot of stuff going on. And it's tough sometimes to make time to actually sit down with our children and instill these ideals in their life, to instruct them, to talk to them and to teach them. I get it. But it's one of those things that we've just got to make time as early as we possibly can in the earliest years. And unfortunately, sometimes the early years of our children's lives are when we are the busiest, because we want to provide as much stuff for them as possible. We want to make sure they have the latest toys. We want to make sure that we take them on the most awesome vacations. Listen, when your children are young, they don't need more toys and vacation. They need more of you. And you need to make that time for them. Do you know what's even more important than that is we've got to be more intentional about taking advantage of something even more important. And it's taking advantage of something called a teachable moment. As parents, yes, we need to sit down. We need to orchestrate moments in our life when we actually sit down and have conversations with our children. But you know what? Life has plenty of opportunities. Life creates lots of opportunities for you to teach and to mold your children. These teachable moments are more powerful than any other tool that you have at your disposal. What's a teachable moment? A teachable moment is a moment in time. Something happens. And in that instance, you can sit your child down and say, hey, look at what happened. Let me tell you why this happened. Let me tell you about the consequences that could happen after this, right? Jesus was a big fan of the teachable moments. As you read through Scripture, he was all the time just sitting his disciples down. Something would happen and he would say, hey, look over there. You see what's going on over there? Let me teach you something, right? And we need to look for those opportunities in our children's lives. Why? One of my favorite passages of Scripture is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6 through 9. It says, you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. I want you to listen to this. It says, repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. We have to take advantage of every single opportunity that life provides for us to teach and to guide our children. See, sometimes as parents, we tend to rely upon the church to teach our children values and to teach our children about God. Now, I want to shock some of you today. It's not our responsibility to guide and to teach and to instill values in your church. I've had lots of conversations with people that maybe have been out of church for 2 or 5 or 10 or 20 years. And they say, well, you know, I just really felt like I needed to come back to church because I want my children to learn about God. Really? If God was that important, where have you been in the last 20 years? You want to rely upon the church to do what you're supposed to do. The church is not the primary influence in your children, whether you like it or not. We're not the primary influence on your children. You are. Your responsibility is to teach your children about God. Your responsibility is to teach your children great values, high moral standards. What's our job? Our job is to reinforce what you should be teaching at home. That's our job. We help reinforce what you're supposed to be doing. So here's the reality about your spiritual influence on your children. I don't care whether you have your children in church or not. You will always be their spiritual influence. You will always be their spiritual influence. What we teach them here will confuse them potentially because of your spiritual influence at home, or it will build on what you're teaching them at home. You are always going to be the primary spiritual influence in your child's life. And so your challenge today is to live it. Take every opportunity that you can. Take advantage of every chance that life throws at your way for these teachable moments to teach them who you want them to be. When you're sitting at home watching TV, something comes on the tube that you know is not appropriate. Guess what? Teachable moment. Share it with your children. When you're on vacation, something happens. Teach your children. When you're on the road, you're taking a trip, whenever they're going to bed, when they get home from school, teachable moments are there all the time. Every step of the way through your life, almost every single day, there's going to be some type of teachable moment that we as parents need to embrace and to leverage and use to mold the minds of our children. And It's more important today than ever before. Because we live in an absolutely broken world. I mean, it's almost impossible to protect them from the broken world that we live in. And that's why this next piece is super important. I can't stress this enough. It is hugely important that we protect them early on from the unhealthy influences. You know, it blows my mind, some of the things that parents allow their children to be exposed to. Blows my mind how some parents will do things in front of their children. I mean, I see people doing some things with their children present, and I'm like, you really want your kid to see you doing that? Sometimes parents will take their children to a movie or something. They'll post it on Facebook and saying, oh, we went to, Super Slasher 75. Yeah. And I'm like, this kid's 6 years old. You really? Some of the music that you expose your children to. And listen, I'm not a doggy downer. I enjoy a lot of things like that. I certainly enjoy movies and music and all of those things. But there are some things that you expose your children to at an early age that they have no business even being in the room of. And then last week, we talked about the internet and talked about the whole struggle with pornography. And some of you give your kids access to the internet. You're not in the room. There's no filter. There's no blocking. I know kids are smart enough to get around stuff, but you're not even taking steps to protect them. Statistics will show that most kids are exposed to pornography at or before the age of 10. And you remember, your kids are like this little piece of Play-Doh. They're soft, they're moldable, they're pliable, they're easily influenced by these kinds of things. A lot of you think it's no big deal. This is a huge deal, guys. It's a huge deal to protect your children. And I know some parents are like, Lance, I want my kids to be exposed to all of this stuff in the world, because you know what? They're going to have to face it. And you know what? You are 100% right. Your kids are going to have to face everything that we're talking about today. But you know what? You get to control when. You get to control when. And this idea of when is so important. Does an 8-year-old need to be exposed to sexuality and nudity? I mean, a 30-year-old doesn't need that anyway, but definitely an 8-year-old doesn't need to be exposed to that kind of stuff. I mean, does a 6-year-old need to be exposed to horrible language? I want you to notice, I didn't say protect them forever from unhealthy influence. I didn't say that. I said protect them early on. Now, why did I say that? Why did I say protect them early on? This is new Play-Doh, soft, pliable, easily moldable, but it's also easily polluted. You ever played with Play-Doh and you tell your kids, say, hey, don't mix the colors. Don't mix the colors. Right? Whenever they're young and they're soft and they're pliable and all of these other colors, these other things kind of come in here and they start playing with it, and then they're like, Mommy, I don't have any red Play-Doh anymore. Why? Because you mixed it all together. Daddy can't pull that out anymore. And what do you end up having? I mean, at first it's kind of pretty. Sort of looks like, a rainbow collection of goodness and awesomeness, but the more the kid plays with it, what does it end up doing? It looks like a big ball of poo. All brown and yucky and all nasty and all that stuff. It's easy to change. It's easy to pollute this Play-Doh when it's early on, and you can't change it back. Now, what happens over time when the Play-Doh just sits? It's hard, doesn't it? You really can't mold it anymore. You can't shape it anymore. And so, in the context of our children, as we're allowing them to be influenced by the world, and they're absorbing all of these things, all of these random colors and all of these different things that we know we don't want them to have in their life, and we're allowing them to absorb and absorb and absorb and absorb. Their hearts and their minds are just like Play-Doh. Over time, it becomes harder and harder and harder, and you can't mold it anymore. You can't mold it anymore. And that's why I say you got to protect them early on. Why? Because early on, you can shape them. You can mold them. You can protect them from having other things that are influencing their life. And you know what happens to red Play-Doh and brown Play-Doh when it sits on the table for a long time? They both get hard. Right? After a period of time, it doesn't matter whether it's an impure piece of Play-Doh or if it's a brand new piece of Play-Doh, it's going to get hard and you can't mold it anymore. And so as you're raising your children and you're molding them early and you're protecting them early, and you're keeping them as pure as you can. Okay, I know we can't protect them completely, but you keep them as pure as you can, and eventually that little mind that you've been molding becomes harder and harder and harder to mold by anybody else. You follow where I'm going? All these other influences. So we need to mold them early. We need to protect them early. But as I was doing the message this week, there was something that weighed pretty heavy on me. And I began to realize that whenever we're molding our children, we're trying to protect them from the world, a lot of times one of the things that we need to protect them from is youth. We talk about polluting them. We talk about bad influences. And sometimes we as parents don't influence our children the way that they need to be. Luke 17, verse 2, it would be better to be thrown into the sea with a millstone hung around your neck than to cause one of these little ones to fall into sin. Parents, we have a great responsibility. You are the primary influence in your children's life. Where do they learn to yell and complain and curse and consume and get drunk or get high? Sometimes we can blame it on the media. Sometimes we can blame it on the society. Sometimes we need to look in the mirror. Where do they learn poor character? Where do they learn to be dishonest? Could it be you? Think about that for just a minute. It'd be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck than for you to cause one of these little ones to fall into sin. We're molding them early. We're trying to protect them. And we need to take a look in the mirror and think, do I need to protect my children from me? That's why it's important that we set the example of who you want them to become. And again, when I'm talking about what, you can deal with that later. I'm talking about who. And it begins with you. It begins with the example that you set. It begins with what you do. I love this verse here in Titus chapter 2, verse number 7. The Apostle Paul is obviously writing a letter to this guy named Titus. And Titus is a leader in the church. He might be on staff. He may be a pastor. And he says this. He says, and you yourself must be an example to them by doing good works of every kind. Let everything you do reflect the integrity and seriousness of your teaching. And you hear this and you heard the context. You're like, good. Hey, I'm off the hook on this. I'm exempt from this scripture because, you know what? I'm not on staff at this church. I'm not on staff at any church. I don't hold a leadership position. I'm not a pastor. But you don't realize the power of the role that you do have as mom or dad because you are a pastor in the context of your home. You are a leader in your home. You are a shepherd in your home. You are an overseer in your home. And yes, you are absolutely a teacher in your home. Does the example that you set validate the teaching that you are giving? Does the example that you set reflect the integrity and seriousness of your teaching? Sometimes the way that we live our life invalidates everything that we try to teach our children. We have this whole do as I say and not as I do complex, right? I don't want you to drink, son. And yet every single weekend, what do? You're throwing back a case. Son, I want you to keep your eyes pure. And then you're turning around and you're looking at porn. Guess who's going to walk in on you someday? Son, I want you to treat women right. And and you're disrespecting your wife or your child's mother. Honey, I want you to save yourself from marriage. And moms, you're letting those girls walk out in a husky of a costume. Or you yourself are walking out in some costume you know you don't need her to wear. And those are just some superficial things. When I talk to the son, I want you to tell the truth. And all you do is lie to people. Everything that you do impacts your children. And I'm going to share with you a truth. This is absolute truth. You can take this to the bank. I don't care how long your children have been in church. I don't care who the grandparents are. None of that. There is a huge percentage of likelihood that your children are going to become who you are, no matter what you do. No matter what you say to them, no matter how many other people try to influence their life, your children are likely to become exactly who you are. How many people have grown up in an alcoholic home and they said, I'm never going to touch that stuff. I don't want anything to do with that. And then 10 years later, what happens to them? They're stuck in the same thing. When we talk about children that are brought up in a broken home where there's an abusive husband and the girl is looking at this, she's like, I don't ever want a man like that. He hurt my mom. He held my mom down. And then who does she end up marrying? Same guy. Your children will become who you are. And there really isn't much more to say about it. It is what it is. But you've got to come to that realization, and you've got to figure out, what do I want for my kids? What do I want for my kids? Who do I want them to become? How do I mold them? And how do I shape them? Do you want it to be a strong foundation of values? Or do you want to let the world do it? You know, the choice is yours. You know, I was playing with my Play-Doh this week. And I made something here, and I wanted to share with you guys my creation. And I figured that these were about child-sized brains. It's pretty impressive. Somebody called the St. Louis Museum. We're going to take these over and display. Anybody need an anatomy lesson? We can talk about the frontal lobe, and brainstem, and all that. Medulla oblongata. This is a brain that has been influenced by a lot of different things. Sort of green, sort of brown, a little red in there. You can still see a little bit of that purity in there. And then here's a brain that has been protected, and you know what? They're both hard. If I were to try to mold these, I'd break them. The question is which one do you want for your children? And I know to keep them absolutely pure is an impossibility. We just live in a broken world, right? But do we really want this for our children? Is this what you want? And so I want you to wrestle with that today. Who is it that you want your children to become? Your children will become who you are. But who do you want them to become? We need to wrestle with that today. Every head bowed and every eye closed. Today, some of you that are really wrestling with this. Some of you, your children are grown and you realize, you know what? Wish I had heard this early on. Some of you have young children and you realize, you know what? I've still got time to change the way that I do some things. But you realize today, I'm not who I need to be. I want to be that example for my children. And it begins with Jesus Christ. If you're here today and you're not a believer, you're not a Christian, you've never accepted Christ as your Savior, that is your starting point. And I want to ask today, who in here is ready to make that change? Who in here is ready to bring Christ into their life, to ask Him to forgive them of their sins so that they can be who God has called them to be? Would you raise your hand? I see that hand back there. Anyone else? I see that hand. Anyone else? Anyone else? I see that hand. Anyone else? Awesome. For those of you that raised your hand, I want you to say this simple prayer. Say, tired of being who I want to be. And I want to be who you want me to be. I'm ready to give my life to you. I'm ready to accept your Son as my Savior. Today I ask you to forgive me of my sin. I ask you to save me, Lord. I ask you to put me on a path, a journey, that I can become like you. Lord, that I may be able to raise my children in the way that you would have me to, that I may raise them in the right way, to put them on the right path. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for dying for me. You know, if you prayed that prayer, not even if you prayed that prayer, you've already made the decision. And prayer is an acknowledgement of what God's already doing in your heart. And for those of you that raised your hand, there are 3 of you, I want to challenge you today to stop by the red tent after it's all over with and go see Dennis. And Dennis has got some things that he wants to give you to kind of help you in your journey with Christ. We want to be there with you and for you. As we wrap up today, every head bowed and every head closed, there's many of you that are Christians today, and you realize, you know what, I know I need to step up. I know that I need to set a better example. I know that these are some things that I need to apply to my life. So who in here today, I'm going to pray for you. If you're a believer today, you raise your hand and say, you know what, Lance, I know I'm ready to step up to the plate as mom or dad, and I'm ready to guide my children. You raise your hand. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hands going up everywhere. God, we come to you today, and Lord, we're challenged, Father, to be who you've called us to be. Lord, we have a great responsibility, whether we're parents, whether we're grandparents, whether we're aunts or uncles. Lord, we are called to raise up a generation of people who are loved by you, who are in love with you, who are passionate about serving you. God, who own the vision of making a difference in this world. But Lord, we know you can change their heart, but we ask you to first change ours, that we may be able to help mold and shape the minds of this future generation, God. That we leave this world in a better place than it was when we had control over it, because we have instilled, God, your values into our children. So God, let your anointing fall upon all of us today. Let us invest in our kids. Let us lead them toward you, that you may make a difference in their life today. God, we pray this in the name of your Son, Jesus. Everybody said, praise his name today.